So we've made it to the end of 2018, and today I'm going to give you my picks for the 10 most tedious, incompetent, and awful films of the year. So let's talk about it. Hi, if you're new here, my name is SeanChandler, and I started this channel essentially because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place and consider clicking that subscribe button. And the reason I talk about movies too much is because I love movies. Most movies. Today we are talking about the movies that I did not love this year. And to be clear, I didn't see every movie that came out this year, and like a normal person, I prioritized trying to see movies that I think I'm going to like. So I was never going to watch 50 Shades of Mommy Porn 3. I'm also not going to go as a creepy guy by myself to go watch Sherlock Gnomes in a theater filled with women and children. And I'm not going to take my kids to go see it because they'd probably like it and then I wouldn't like them very much. That was a joke. Be sure to share your picks for the worst movies of the year down below in the comment section, and come back tomorrow. I'm going to put out my list of the 10 best movies of the year. Also, one final thing before we get started. If you like to talk movies too much, consider picking up one of these shirts in my merch store. A lot of the shirts I wear in my videos are available in the store. Every single month, there's a 30% off sale. That means $14 t-shirts. If you talk movies too much, this is the perfect shirt for you, and let's get started. Kicking things off is The Predator. Now, this is the movie on this list that I probably had the most fun with, but it's also probably the most incompetently put together blockbuster that I saw. Apparently, the first test screening for the movie was a total disaster, so they rewrote, reshot, and re-edited the entire second half of the film really badly. Characters appear places out of nowhere. There's a main cast member who's killed off very suddenly and in a confusing manner, and it literally took me about 10 minutes to realize that he was dead. At one point in time in the movie, two characters are talking and one of them says, "Do you remember back at Halloween?" But in the context of the movie, it's still Halloween night. With the massive reshoots and restructuring of the movie, the pieces just don't fit together right. But even if you set aside all the problems with the film related to the reshoots, the characters and story that were set up weren't all that interesting in the first place. It feels like someone trying to write like Shane Black as opposed to Shane Black just writing. Going into 2018, this was my most anticipated movie of the year. In fact, I left my wife in the hospital alone the day after my daughter was born to go and watch this movie. And while they didn't deliver a movie devoid of entertainment, this is what they gave me. Coming in at number 9 is Red Sparrow. Credit where credit is due. This is probably the best made film on this list. But just because a movie is professionally shot and well acted doesn't mean that it's something that I want to watch. In the case of this film, it's a spy thriller that focuses in on Soviet sexpionage. That is to say, the use of sex as a method to gain information. And as a big portion of this film is the spy training school preparing them for the sexpionage. It involves women being forced to watch and perform sex acts against their will. And that means at certain points in time in the movie, girls break down crying because they don't want to have to do certain sexual acts. There's on-screen rape, there's people murdered while having sex, and all of this is in the first 35 minutes of the film. This is the only movie that I turned off this year. No matter how well shot it is, I'm just not entertained by rape and sexual violence. Number 8 is Truth or Dare. The basic premise here of a deadly game of truth or dare seems like a pretty good setup for a Blumhouse horror film, and I thought that this might be another fun horror flick like Happy Death Day. Nope. This movie fails at pretty much everything after the premise because it doesn't really know what it wants to be. At its core, it has a whole bunch of elements of 80s slasher movies, whether you're talking about college students drinking and doing drugs, there's gratuitous sex scenes, as well as, of course, a bunch of murders. But it's a PG-13 movie, and graphic violence and gratuitous sex don't really mix with the PG-13 rating, so right out of the gate, this movie feels like an edited for TV version of itself. And some of the sex ties into the game of truth or dare that they're forced to play, in which case that gives a very rapey vibe to a specific scene in this movie, and it doesn't seem like the creators knew that. Beyond that, the movie just makes up the rules as it goes along. The final explanation for what's going on feels about as generic as an explanation as you can get in a horror film, and the final twist and reveal in this film just makes you hate the lead characters in this film. Overall, this is just a total waste of a pretty good setup. At number 7 is The Spy Who Dumped Me. When I first saw the trailer for this one, I was actually uncharacteristically intrigued by a movie starring Kate McKinnon, probably because it's a spy movie. I've heard a lot of people say that Kate McKinnon is really funny, but I've never enjoyed her in anything that I've seen her in, and this is no exception. From the beginning, I found this movie mostly tedious. I didn't enjoy either one of the two lead characters, and none of the humor was landing for me. When the jokes weren't McKinnon acting weird and obnoxious, they seemed to think that having Mila Kunis say crass things constituted jokes in and of itself. It's also surprisingly violent for a goofy comedy. In most contexts, I'm all for violence. I should probably clarify that I mean in the movies, not real life. But here it just felt totally out of place. The mix of lame comedy with bad romance and graphic violence, they just didn't go together. At best, this is a tonally inconsistent, generic buddy spy comedy, but since I didn't like the jokes or the characters or the cast, it's just a waste of 2 hours that I wish I had dumped. Coming in at number 6 is Hurricane Heist. Now, if you haven't seen this, Jim, it's about a group of people committing a heist in the middle of a hurricane from the director of the original Fast and Furious. I went in just wanting some dumb fun. Now, it was very dumb, but there wasn't much fun. This movie takes itself way too seriously. Instead of just embracing the stupidity of the concept, it attempts to have these really big dramatic character arcs about two brothers in conflict and their dead father, and you don't care about any of it. A hurricane heist movie should be many things, but boring is not one of them. Add to that, they decided to give everyone these atrocious Alabama accents. The star of this movie is Toby Kebbell from Yorkshire in England, and an Alabama accent does not belong coming out of his face hole. All they had to do was give me some fun, and this movie wouldn't be on the list. Nope. Bringing us into the top 5 is Robin Hood. I didn't think it was possible to make a fast-paced, big-budget movie about Robin Hood dull, but they found a way. Right out of the gate, this movie annoyed me because it did this thing that was really popular and cliche about 15 years ago, where the movie starts out with voiceover saying, "You think you know the story of Robin Hood? This is the real story of Robin Hood." And then within minutes of telling us this is the real story of Robin Hood, it cuts to a sequence during the Crusades that has a kind of a Black Hawk Down vibe, where someone is shooting an arrow machine gun at Robin as rocks are exploding all around him. And it's so over the top, it almost feels like it's a spoof. There's no regard for proper attire or technology. Robin's training from soldier to superhero takes place in the span of a weekend. It's as if the writers were just making stuff up as they went along. There's also a bunch of hollow pseudo-political allegory, like the sheriff of Nottingham keeps dropping 21st century political talking points like pay your fair share. There's no commentary, there's no meaning to it. It's just these weird references to the modern political culture. Of all the movies this year, this is the one that annoyed me the most. At number 4 is Gotti. This movie has the honor of being the lowest rated film on Rotten Tomatoes of 2018 with a rock solid 0%. I've heard some people say that Gotti is The Room of mobster movies. No. The Room is so bad it's good in every sequence and in every way. Gotti, however, is so bad it's boring in every sequence and in every way. There's plenty to be said about the wildly inconsistent use of makeup or the over-the-top performances, but the real underlying problem here is that there's no discernible story, character arc, forward momentum, or themes. It's as if the writer read John Gotti's Wikipedia page and then wrote a bunch of random details about his life on a bunch of note cards, threw them up in the air, put them back together, and just wrote the script in the order of the note cards. And then the movie just has an insane soundtrack. The main theme is from from Pitbull, which is a weird choice for a movie set in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This movie's total garbage. Remember to share your picks for the worst movies down below in the comments section. Come back tomorrow for my list of the 10 best movies of the year. And if you're watching in the future, check out this playlist up above after this video for all of my end of the year ranking videos. If you enjoyed this video, there's something in there that you will love. Coming in at number 3 and 7 years late is Slenderman. Every single year, studios crank out these dirt cheap horror movies of questionable quality, and this year the crappiest of the bunch was Slenderman. Right off the bat, Slenderman is totally a background character in his own movie. He doesn't appear all that often in the film, and he's just kind of in these images in the background until the third act when he turns into a big piece of garbage CGI. Instead, we get to spend a bunch of time with Generic Teenager 1 and Generic Teenager 2, who of course have a bunch of horror movie dialogue that sounds nothing like the way actual teenagers talk. And Generic Teenager 1 and 2 behave just as dumb as all generic girls do in generic bad horror movies. There's like 5 sequences in this movie where people are scared and in a spooky setting, walking through their house afraid, but they don't turn the light switch on for no other reason other than they're in a generic bad horror movie. All the movie has to offer is some creepy images and some creepy noises at certain parts. There's no story tying it together, there's no rules that give order to the chaos that is the movie, and you're definitely not interested in Generic Teenager 1 or Generic Teenager 2. If all you want is to watch some creepy images, go to the search bar up above, type in The Ring Creepy Video. Boom! I just saved you 2 hours. Our runner-up is Happy Time Murders. In general, I tend to like dark, inappropriate humor, but the assumption inside of that is that it's clever and they're actually writing jokes. The Happy Time Murders is a one-joke movie devoid of any wit. Now, if you're amused by Muppets behaving badly in and of itself, you'll probably enjoy this movie. But if you require more than mere shock value, I can't believe that Muppet was smoking crack. I can't believe that Muppet was having sex. I can't believe that Muppet's head was blown off. Then there's absolutely nothing in this movie for you. The only joke in this film is the shock value of watching Muppets say and do things. The story is a cliche, smutty and pulpy private investigator mystery that exists purely to send the characters off to more smutty and gross places. If you removed the puppet gimmick from the film, you would literally just have a really crappy and gross porno. This was my number 1 pick until I decided that my new number 1's picks, transgressions, were a lot more morally reprehensible. With that said, the worst movie of 2018 is Show Dogs. Now, I've got a 4-year-old daughter, so I watch a lot of these talking dog movies on Netflix. I've probably watched Santa Paws 3 different times this month. Now, I don't have any problems with these movies existing as they bring joy into my daughter's life, but most of them have the good sense to go direct to TV or direct to video. Show Dogs, however, decided to go straight to the theaters. It didn't increase the quality, the CGI, or anything like that. They just decided to release it to a much broader audience. Now, this isn't a movie that I would give a good review to, but that's not why it's on the list. No, it's on this list because they decided to include a subplot about the lead dog in the film having his Mr. Happy fondled as is part of the customs of dog shows against his will, and his friends training him to go to his zen place when they tickle his pickle so he doesn't mind it so much. Now, that would be a terrible subplot in any movie, but in a kid's movie, it becomes wildly irresponsible because it can be used for child grooming. As a parent, one of your responsibilities is to teach your children what is and is not appropriate touch and what is consent. And then these morons in Hollywood come along and confuse the entire issue and put out some accidental child grooming material because they think that genital fondling is funny. Luckily, the internet was quick to call them out on it, and they recut the movie, cut the sequence out, and by the second weekend, it was removed. Either way, they included child grooming tactics in their film, so the least I can do is declare your garbage movie the worst movie of 2018. Remember to come back tomorrow for my picks for the top 10 best movies of the year. That's going to be a lot more fun to talk about. If you're watching in the future, check out that playlist right over there with all of my end of the year videos. If you like this one, there's something else in there that you'll like. Thank you so much for watching, and let's keep talking movies too much in 2019.